Brad Pitt was walking through a mall in New York, trying not to draw too much attention to himself. He knew that his face was recognized by millions, but in this place, he managed to remain just another passerby. No one was asking for autographs, no one was requesting selfies, and it was exactly for this reason that he enjoyed these walks. They reminded him of the times when he was just an ordinary guy from Springfield, dreaming of big cinema. The crowd bustled around, people exiting boutiques, hurrying on their way. Brad stopped near a display of vintage records, lazily examining the album covers. He was about to move on when the soft but captivating sounds of a guitar reached his ears. It wasn't just a melody, there were emotions, sincerity, something real in it. He turned toward the sound and saw her. A little girl, about 10 years old, was sitting on the floor by one of the columns. In front of her lay the case of an old, worn guitar, with a few coins and $1 or $2 bills glinting inside. The girl was playing, fully immersed in the music, oblivious to the passers-by. Her fingers deftly plucked the strings, and though the instrument was clearly of poor quality, she drew clear, poignant notes from it. Brad Pitt froze. A memory of his youth resurfaced, of the days when he had just started his path, when the dream seemed like something elusive yet alluring. He knew what it meant to chase a dream when you have almost nothing. He took a step forward, then another. People walked by, some glanced at the girl, but no one stopped. In this huge city, with its frantic rhythm, such moments were easily lost in the flow. But Brad couldn't just walk past. Getting closer, he saw the girl close her eyes as she played a particularly difficult transition. In that moment, he noticed the wear on her guitar, the broken headstock, the strings barely hanging on. It was clear the instrument had seen better days. After the melody ended, Brad Pitt softly said, "You play beautifully." The girl flinched and looked up at him. There was a slight confusion in her eyes, but then a flicker of curiosity. She didn't recognize him, or pretended not to. "Thank you," she replied, giving a hesitant smile. Brad crouched down, glancing at her guitar. "How long have you been playing?" "A few years. I teach myself." The girl carefully adjusted the strings, as if trying to hide their poor condition. "Why here? Are you collecting money?" She nodded, her gaze dropping. There was something both shy and stubborn in her movements. Brad felt his curiosity rising. What had brought her here? What story lay behind this little figure, sitting in the middle of a bustling shopping mall, yet seemingly separate from the world? He decided he wanted to know more. The girl slightly tilted her head, and her fingers awkwardly strummed the strings. It seemed like she was a bit nervous, but she still kept smiling. Brad Pitt, noticing this, gently continued the conversation. "Do you play here often?" he asked, trying to create a casual atmosphere. "Yes, almost every day," the girl replied, though her voice sounded uncertain. She seemed to be trying to act mature, but Brad could see the shyness reflected in her eyes. "Is this a place for musicians?" Brad continued asking, sensing some kind of inner turmoil in her words. The girl looked at him, and there was a slight shadow of doubt in her eyes, as if she didn't want to reveal everything. But, finally, she decided to open up. Well, I'm not a professional. I play guitar because I want to be a musician. But I don't have money for a proper guitar or lessons." Her voice trailed off quietly, and her eyes dropped to the floor. "My mom says that you need to work a lot for that, but we don't have money." Brad listened carefully, feeling a growing sympathy for this little dreamer. He remembered how he himself had struggled for his dreams in his youth, with nothing but passion and determination. "Do you really want to be a musician?" he asked, trying to make his voice sound encouraging. The girl nodded, now more confidently, and her eyes lit up. "Yes. I love music. It helps me forget all the difficulties. When I play, I forget what's around. Sometimes everything feels simpler than it actually is." Brad thought for a moment. He knew this was more than just a desire to play an instrument. This was her dream, her way of escaping from the harsh reality, her only chance to feel alive, to be part of something bigger. "You play really well," Brad said. "You have talent." The girl blushed and looked down. "Thank you," she whispered. He stayed silent for a while, watching as she adjusted the strings and took the guitar in her hands again, but his thoughts were far away. He knew how important it was for a person, especially a child, to not lose faith in their dream. And right now, in front of him, was someone who was still fighting for hers. "Listen," Brad finally made up his mind. "I want to help you. You said you don't have money for a guitar, so I'll buy you a new one. A good one, that will sound like your dream." The girl froze, unable to believe her ears. She looked up at him, trying to figure out if he was joking. "Really?" Her voice was full of surprise, and her heart started to race. "Yes, really. I know how important it is to have a good instrument if you want to be a musician. I'll help you." The girl stood there for a few seconds, bewildered, unable to believe this was actually happening. Then her eyes filled with tears, and she almost started crying but managed to hold back. She couldn't believe that her dream was about to come true. "Thank you, so much," she barely spoke, her voice trembling. Brad smiled and stood up to leave. But before walking away, he turned and said, "You'll make it. The most important thing is to never give up. And remember, every great musician was once just like you, only with a guitar and a dream." She nodded, and his words were engraved in her heart. Brad Pitt disappeared into the crowd, leaving the girl with a new, unimaginable feeling. She believed that her dream could truly become a reality. The girl sat in the mall, knowing that this moment was her chance to make her dream come true. Time seemed to move slowly, and every glance at the clock only heightened her anxiety. She was nervous, unsure of what would happen next, what Brad Pitt would say, and how it would all unfold. He had promised to pick out the guitar without her, to surprise her. She sat there, nervously wringing her hands, feeling her heart beat faster with anticipation. It was so incredible that it seemed almost impossible to believe that it was actually happening. 30 minutes passed, and finally, Brad appeared. He walked in with a broad smile and a guitar in his hands. His confident stride, his eyes, it all seemed like some kind of magic. The girl jumped to her feet, her heart racing in her chest. "Did you pick one?" she asked, barely holding back her emotions. Brad Pitt nodded and handed her the instrument. It was elegantly wrapped, with a finish that sparkled in the light of the mall, looking brand new. The girl hesitated for a moment, but then took the guitar, immediately feeling how perfectly it fit in her hands. The strings were soft, but their sound was clear and deep. "This is yours," Brad said, as if he understood that this moment meant much more to her than just a purchase. "I chose it because you deserve one like this. With a good sound, easy to play. I'm sure you'll do great." The girl carefully ran her fingers across the strings, and her face lit up with a smile. It wasn't just a guitar. It was something more, an instrument that could now lead her to her dream. She couldn't believe her eyes and hands. This is like a dream," she whispered, unable to believe that she was holding it. Brad smiled, but his expression remained serious. "You need to understand that this guitar is just the beginning," he said. "Now your job is to work on yourself, to grow. I know you have talent. The most important thing is to not be afraid to move forward." Her eyes were filled with tears, but she held them back, not wanting to show any weakness. She stood up, holding the guitar in her hands, unable to say a word. All her dreams now seemed so real. She wanted to thank him, but could only manage to say, "Thank you, so much." Brad looked at her, and his eyes reflected pride. He knew that she wasn't just receiving a gift. She was getting a chance to change her life, a chance she might never have gotten without this encounter. "You're not alone," he said quietly, as if it were the most important thing he could say. "Understand, this path is yours, and you decide how to walk it." The girl, holding the guitar in her hands, looked at Brad Pitt again. She understood that this moment, this day, would stay with her forever. Everything she was feeling could only be expressed in one word. Thank you. Several weeks passed, and the girl's life began to change. Every morning, she woke up with new determination, and the guitar became her companion. She played it for hours, feeling how the music filled her soul and gave her strength. The instrument, which once seemed out of reach, had now become a part of her, an inseparable part of her life. The strings didn't break, the sound was pure and bright, and she felt that this was her chance. All this time, Brad Pitt remained in her thoughts, though he didn't appear. He asked for nothing in return for his help, and it seemed that her life had gained a new purpose. Music became not just an escape from everyday struggles but also a path to herself, to her true dreams. She began to work hard, striving to become a real musician. She knew that no one would save her and that the path would be difficult, but she was ready for it. One day, as she was walking down the street, she noticed a billboard that read, "Talent Competition for Beginner Musicians." The prize, the chance to record your first album. This was exactly what she had dreamed of. But to enter the competition, she needed to send a video of her performance, and she didn't even have a camera. Nevertheless, the girl didn't give up. She continued to play, despite her doubts, even though she wasn't confident her performance would be good enough. But every chord, every movement of her fingers across the strings made her believe that she could do this. She asked a friend for an old phone, recorded the video, and submitted her application. She didn't expect a response, but after a few days, she received a letter. She was accepted. She was happy, but at the same time, she couldn't believe that her dream of a music career was becoming a reality. The opportunity had appeared, but it also came with responsibility and enormous effort. The girl knew that competing with professionals would be difficult, but she also understood that this chance was not something to be missed. A month later, on the day of the competition, the girl felt both nervous and excited. She entered the hall where the performances would take place and sat in a corner, trying not to attract attention. She thought her chances of winning were slim, but she had one important advantage: her passion for music and the belief that she could keep moving forward. At that moment, as she sat in the hall, she noticed a familiar face. Brad Pitt was sitting in the front row among the judges. Her heart skipped a beat. Had he really come? But how? He hadn't said he would be here. She tried to focus, but his presence made it impossible to concentrate. When it was her turn, she stood up and walked to the stage with her guitar in hand, her fingers brushing the strings. The hall fell silent, and in that quiet, tense moment, she felt as if life itself was standing behind her. She wasn't playing to win, she was playing to feel that she was in the right place. The melody poured out of her soul, and it seemed like the world stopped for that brief moment. When she finished, the hall erupted in applause. She looked at Brad Pitt, who was sitting in the front row, watching her play attentively. He smiled, and in his eyes, she saw what she needed: respect and pride in her efforts. Later, during the interview with the winners, the girl said, "I didn't believe I could make it here. But when I was playing, I felt that it was my music. And I know that my journey is just beginning." And at that moment, looking at her from afar, Brad Pitt quietly said to himself, "She did it. She didn't just dream, she went and made it happen." The girl became the winner of the competition. That day marked a turning point in her life, opening doors she had only dreamed of before. She couldn't believe that her music was liked so much that she had the opportunity to record her first album. The entire journey seemed incredible to her, as if she had walked through a fog and was now seeing the light. But in her heart, there was one big but: how would she move forward? What would happen to her future if she couldn't continue to grow and improve? Everything changed after the victory. The girl was no longer the little girl with a guitar collecting money at the mall. She was on her way to her dream, and now her name was starting to be recognized. But the nervousness didn't go away. Each new performance, each new show brought more anxiety. She could no longer just calmly pick up her guitar and play. Her whole life was now under a microscope. Stress, expectations, all these new challenges, they had become part of her life. Months passed, and she began to realize that true success doesn't always come right away. But with each day, she became more confident. She recorded songs, worked with producers, and everything was going according to plan. However, despite all these successes, one thought never left her: she was still that girl who once sat on the floor in the mall with a dream of a guitar. Brad Pitt, who had extended his hand to help her, had now become something more than just a celebrity. He was her inspiration, her example of how important it is not to give up and to believe in one's dream. One day, while walking down the street, she saw an announcement on the TV screen for one of the popular music shows where she was also supposed to perform. It was an important event, and her participation in it meant a new stage in her career. But at that moment, she thought about how she could thank the person who had given her a chance. It was Brad Pitt. She realized she couldn't remain indifferent. She had to find a way to say, "Thank you." She called her manager and asked if it would be possible to surprise Brad Pitt, and then decided that she would be completely honest and sincere. Soon, she decided that the best way to express her gratitude would be publicly. She decided that during her next appearance on the show, she would write the words, "This was gifted to me by Brad Pitt," on the guitar that had already become an inseparable part of her. It would be her gesture of appreciation. She went to the store where Brad had once chosen the guitar for her. There, she bought a new model, which she might use in the future. Additionally, she brought her old guitar, the very one on which she had started her journey. The store agreed to help her with the inscription, and soon the guitar was ready. She felt something change inside her, and her gratitude became genuine. When the day of the show came, she stood before the camera with this guitar in her hands, and before beginning her performance, she said words that were so important to her. "I want to thank one person who gave me a chance and faith in myself. My first guitar, the one on which I learned to play, was gifted to me by Brad Pitt. He didn't just help me, he gave me the opportunity to make my dream come true. And I hope that my music will be as strong as his faith in me." At that moment, the guitar with the inscription, "This was gifted to me by Brad Pitt," was shown on the screen. She continued to play, and every chord she played was filled with gratitude. The hall was silent, and after her performance, the room erupted in applause. Tears sparkled in her eyes, but they were tears of happiness. A few minutes later, she returned backstage and saw a message from Brad. He had sent her a short but sincere note. "I'm proud of you. You did it. I believed in you." At that moment, the girl felt that her dream had not only come true, but that she had been able to walk this path with dignity. Brad Pitt had become not just her support, but also a symbol of belief in herself. And now, when she looked at the guitar that had been with her all this time, she knew for sure, everything that had happened to her was the result of her perseverance and the support of the people who believed in her. Months passed, and the girl, now a grown woman, continued her journey in music. Her name had become well known, and her concerts were attracting more and more people. She had recorded several albums, and each one was a step toward her dream. But despite all her successes, she never forgot that moment in the mall when Brad Pitt helped her believe in herself. The guitar, with the inscription, "This was gifted to me by Brad Pitt," remained her symbol, a reminder of how everything had started. The woman became famous not only for her talent but also for her sincerity. She was simple and open, and her music was deep, heartfelt, and full of emotion. She often said in interviews that all her success was connected to the moment when she was given a chance, when no one turned her away, when they believed in her dream. One day, she was invited to a major music show. The hosts already knew her name, but for her, it was still a big challenge. The show promised to be important, as it was the final stage, the presentation of the main music award of the year. Everything was ready. She stood in front of the mirror, put on her concert outfit, and before heading to the stage, she glanced at her old guitar, the one with the inscription. Brad Pitt had been the person who had given her not only the instrument but also the faith in herself. When she stepped onto the stage, that very guitar with the inscription hung behind her. She felt her heart pounding wildly, as if the whole world had slowed down. She approached the microphone, and before she began singing, she said, "This song is for everyone who ever believed in me. And for the person who gave me a chance when I was nobody. I will never forget that he helped me believe I could go further. Brad, if you're watching this, thank you. You became my inspiration." Her words pierced the silence of the hall. At that moment, she felt that her music now not only expressed her emotions but also connected her to the world, to those who supported her. That evening, her performance was recognized as the best. Her name rang out across the country. But what was more important was that she had been able to fulfill her dream. And even though Brad Pitt wasn't present at the awards, she knew he would be proud of her success. Everything he had done for her had turned into a story of how one person can change someone's life just by believing in them. A few days later, she sat in her studio, reviewing recordings of the show. And then, on the screen, she saw Brad Pitt. He was sitting in his spot in the front row, watching her performance. He smiled quietly. She couldn't hide the tears that appeared in her eyes. And now, years later, she realized that her meeting with Brad Pitt had not been a coincidence. His help and belief in her had been the very push that made her believe in herself and push through all the challenges she faced. But her success was also the result of her perseverance and her willingness to keep going, no matter what. She looked again at the guitar with the inscription. It was a symbol not only of her journey but also of how important it is to believe in others, to help, even when the world seems too big and unfair. Brad Pitt had gifted her the guitar, but what was far more important was that he had given her belief in herself. And that belief had become the foundation for everything she had achieved. Modestly, but with pride, she looked out the window, knowing that her dream had come true. She hadn't forgotten that moment in the mall when everything had begun. And now, every time she picked up her guitar, she knew she wasn't alone on this journey.